our Sedra in Pashas Korach tries to get behind Korach's motivations, and the trigger is by Yikach Korach, and Korach took. So one of the reasons the Medrash gives, what gives him the license to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu, one of them is this Medrash. Vayikach Korach, the Medrash says his eye misled him, his visual acuity. When he looked ahead into his progeny, who was going to come out of his children, he saw a chain of great lineage. I'm quoting from the Medrash, translated. He prophetically saw that Novi would descend from him.
There's a lot of noise.
Let me share that pasuk because we say it every Friday night. Moshe v'Aaron b'koyanov u'Shmuel b'kodesh moi. This is the Shlomo Carlebach rendition. After Lechu Narananu, we say 7 kapitel Tehillim before Lechol Dodi. One of them is Psalm 99. Koirim el Hashem v'hu yanem. Moses and Aaron among his priests, and Shmuel? Why is David HaMelech comparing Shmuel to Moshe and Aaron? But out of all the prophets in our liturgy, we cite this Psalm 99, in which the level of Shmuel is so high that he's compared to Moshe and Aaron. So my question is, Korach looks into his future and he sees Moshe and Aaron equaling Shmuel from that pasuk. Moshe and Aaron b'koyanov u'Shmuel b'korishmo. So Shmuel is on the level of Moshe and Aaron in proclaiming the name of God. And in Jeremiah 15:1 it says, Vayomer Adonai Eli, God said to me, Jeremiah, Im Yamod Moshe u'Shmuel lefonai, if Moses and Samuel would stand before me, Ein nafshi ela omazeh, I would not even be won over. Shalach me al ponai. This is Jeremiah 15, the gloom and the doom. Even if you were going to bring me Moshe and Shmuel, I won't be moved. Get them out of here. I want them out of Eretz Yisrael. But notice that he uses 2 prophets and he equates Moshe with Shmuel. And so this is what Korach sees that gives him his license to challenge Moshe. My great-great-grandson's going to be someone who in the Torah is equal in status to you. And therefore, maybe I am in equal status to you. Do you see how the Medrash is putting it together? Korach saw that through the Ruach HaKodesh that he would also have 24 mishmarot of descendants who would participate in the Beis HaMikdash. And so he concludes from this vision that he himself was a world-class righteous individual, a tzaddik yesod olam, and therefore he's willing to take his chances with the Ketorah's challenge. So that is what gives Korach his license, and we have to come back to that in the end and to see. So we have to then go and say, okay, well, let's look at Shmuel. What makes Shmuel so great? And so we have to go back to the ascension scene of Shmuel. Well, how was Shmuel born? And we know that at Shiloh, his mother Hannah, in a cute sense of isolation, and her sister wife's tormenting, Pnina's tormenting, she goes to Shiloh, she goes to the temple, and she implores the Ribbono Shel Olam, and she prays fervently that if God will grant her a son, a male child, she'll give that child back to God after weaning him. Now, this prayer is observed by Eli HaKohen, Eli the high priest, who presumes her moving lips indicates that she is drunk. So Hannah is wrongly accused and wrongly judged by a second male character. First was her husband, and now by the priest. Hannah's prayers are answered by God, who remembers her in Shmuel Aleph, the very first chapter of Shmuel, just like he remembered Rachel and all the other barren women. And when she finally weans him, and she now fulfills her promise by relinquishing her to the Almighty, she brings him back to Shiloh, to Eli, with significant sacrifices to God. So let's look at those psukim because they are critical. Nope. Okay, Shmuel Aleph. Vatalehu ima. She brings him up. It's interesting because the word ola also means a sacrifice, but she is, in a sense, sacrificing this boy forever. She's going to relinquish him to the priesthood. Kasher gemalatu, as she had weaned him, when she had weaned him. But she didn't just bring him, she brought him up along with parim shlosha, efa, achaz, kemech, v'gai, yain, and all this sacrificial stuff, 3 bulls, an ephah, jar of wine. Vataviehu beit Adonai Shiloh, and she brings him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. Now look at those next 2 words. Vahanar Naar. What does that mean? Okay, so JPS translates it, despite the boy being very young. We know he was young because it says Kasher Gemalatu, around 2 years of age. So what are you telling me, Vahanar Nar? So JPS says, although the boy was a boy, Alter writes, and the lad was but a lad. He was but a lad. And he says it may be relevant that the term nar, lad, is used here just like it was used for Isaac when he is on the point of being sacrificed. So there is a hinting here of the olah and her bringing him as an olah, and the nar with Isaac being sacrificed as a nar by Abraham. But that doesn't end there. Look at the next point. Vayishchatu et hapor, and after slaughtering the bull, vayaviu et hanar el Eli, and now they bring the nar to Eli. So there's another insistence on that word nar. Vatome, and she says, Bi Adoni chai nafshecha Adoni, ani ha'isha hanitzevet imcha. And she said, please, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you and prayed to God when you thought I was drunk. It doesn't say that. I'm that same woman. Now, there's going to be some kind of conversation between these 2 verses, because between this verse and this verse, something doesn't sit right. She's saying, Bi Adoni, excuse me. What are you talking about? She's just bringing him to Eli. So something went down between this verse and this verse where she gets really, really upset and says, Bi Adoni, chai nafshecha. I mean, these are expletives. Adoni, excuse me. Bi Adoni, chai nafshecha Adoni. I was the one that prayed next to you. You thought I was drunk. What are you doing? What are you doing? Something very tragic was about to happen, in which she then intervenes with Eli to tell him, I'm the woman. And we don't know what it was. And then she adds, El hanar hazeh hitpalalti. This is the very nar I was praying for. This little pitzkala here I'm bringing. Vayiten Adonai li et she'elati asher shalti. So to understand the drama that's going on, we have to then move to the Gemara in Brachos, because the Gemara in Brachos will fill out the gap that doesn't make sense, and the Gemara will look at the words Vayishchatu et hapar, Vayaviu et hanar el Eli. There is some connection between the slaughtering of the par and bringing the nar to Eli that triggers this whole drama. So just let's look at that.
I'll never liked it over there in the back. That's up. I'll do that there. I want to keep it.
And so the Gemara in Brachos 31 says, this is what's really going on. This is what's really going on. There's a whole halachic shaila. Omar lahen Eli. Eli said, Kiru koyen. When they brought up those things along with the boy, so Eli tells them, Kiru koyen, call a priest. Let lishchot, let the priest come and slaughter this for the Lord. Chazanu Shmuel dehava mahadre basar koil mishkan. Now, Shmuel, this little pitzkala from the Weitzner Cheder, sees them looking for a priest to slaughter the animal. Amalahu, so he says to them, Lamalahu lahadodi basar koil mishkan. What the hell are you going looking for a priest? Shchita bezag sheira. The slaughtering of an offering performed by a non-priest is perfectly fine. So this goes into the whole Gemara and Chagiga and about whether you can, whether shchita is valid with a zar, whether it has to be a priest or it can be a non-priest. That's a whole sugya. It's a whole Gemara in Zvachim. It's a whole sugya of Shakal Pataria. So now, Aisula Kame de Eli. So they bring this little chutzpahdik boy and said, Amale, Menolaha. So he says, Shmuel says to him, Eli says to him, how'd you know this? Where'd you learn this from? So Amale, Shmuel says to him, and now they're having an argument like two adults in the base medrash. Miksiv v'shochat hakoyin doesn't say in the posuk v'shochat hakoyin. It says v'hikrivu hakohanim ksiv. It says in the posuk, and the priest shall offer. So just like the Gemara says, Mikabola ve'elech mitzvah kuna. Remember, there are 5 stages in bringing a korban, right? With Kabbalas Hadam, Smichas Apar. There are 5 different stages. The Shchita, and it's only Mikabolas Hadam and further on that you need a kohen. Before that, the actual Shchita itself, Shchita Kshera Bazar. A Shchita is okay with a zar, with a non-kohen. a very dramatic confrontation between Eli HaKohen and a 2-year-old. So what then takes place? Something very dramatic that explains the drama that's happening between the two verses. And what is that? Omale. Eli HaKohen says to this little Weitzner Cheder kid, Meima Shapir Komata, hot gelernt gut. You learned it right. That's exactly how it's learned. I would say that's how the Gemara talks, but this is 500 years before the Gemara. Shapir Komat. But this is written in the Gemara in Brachas. So this is the retroactive insertion between the two psukim of a conversation that from the rabbinic imagination of what took place to explain why Hannah had to intervene in the next verse. Shapi komat, hot gut gelernt. Mihu, however, moire halacha bifnei rabach at. You are guilty of ruling in the presence of a teacher. Now, in the Gemara, that is one of the biggest infractions. You have to show deference to those who taught you before. One of the ways is where you walk, to the right, to the left, behind them. The other way is taking care of the Rebbe's needs. The other way is visiting the Rebbe on Yom Tovim. And the other negative is you don't dare paskin a shaila, more halacha, in front of your Rebbe. And you just did this, you little pipsqueak. You just did that before me. Shapir. Shapir komat. Nu got gut gelernt. You made it right. You were over an issa, a big issa, which is to be moire halacha lifnei rabo. In fact, we know this from the Chumash. We've had this with Moshe Rabbeinu, Eldad Meidad, etc. Okay. Oh my giddy aunt. This is what's going on in the drama between the two verses. Between those two clauses was they brought the nar to Eli to explain why he was criticizing the need to go and look for a kohen. And as a result, Eli paskins that he is chayiv misa. He is warranting the death penalty. And now Asya Chana v'kotzev bacha coming. So now Chana's coming back and crying before him. Ani ha'isha anitzeve simcha bazeh. So now I can understand the reason for this dramatic exchange, which didn't make sense before. One second, here it is. Okay, vayishratu es apor, vayoviu es anar el Eli. Fine, but in between that, before they brought him to Eli, he was going around saying, you don't need a kohen, you don't need a kohen. What the hell are you going around looking for a kohen? We can bring it, it's fine. And then comes here, in between these two psukim, the Gemara says that Eli paskins that he's chayiv misa, vatoime, now she says, oy vavoy, are you kidding me? Bi adoni, chay nafshecha adoni. Ani ho'isha nitzeveh, I was the one that was davening, I was barren. I was being tormented by Pnina. I was davening to the Rebbeinu Shalom for a baby boy. Ani ha'isha hanitzeves imcha bazeh. So Amale, so what does he say? He says something really cruel. He says, no, Shivki li da'neche. He says, let me punish him. Ubei rachame, and I will beg for mercy. Okay. I'm gonna kill him. Hi, Lisa. I'm gonna do it. But what I will do is I will grant you. I'll daven to God. But yoiv lo rabba mine, so you'll have another son who's greater than this. He won't be paskening shilas in front of his rebbe. Yoiv lo rabba minech. He'll be greater than this. Amra la. So she says to him, and here comes the punchline. Back to that word nar. We had nar here, and now we realize why this is the light vort that keeps coming back. Vahanar nar. He wasn't just a baby, he was already a lad. Vayoviu et hanar, and this lad was paskening shilas. And so he says, don't worry about it. I'll kill him. You'll daven for a better one. I'll give you a better one. Then she says, no, elanar hazeh hispalalti. I was davening for this nar, this one. It's an absolutely dramatic episode in the early years of Shmuel Hanavi. He's Chayiv Misa. Eli wants to kill him. And she says, El Hanar Hazeh Hitpalalti. Now, let's dig a little bit deep into that Gemara before I share with you my thoughts. So the Gemara has a very interesting take. As we said, the Kohanim are not associated with the actual the shechita of the carbon, because the pasuk says in Vayikra 1:4, "V'samach yadav al rosha ola," he should lean his hands on the head of the ola. V'shoched et ben habakar lefnei Hashem. Et bnei Aaron HaKohanim shall bring the blood. V'ikriv bnei HaKohanim et hadam. So the Kohanim are not mentioned in the association with the slaughtering, only concerning the leaning on the rosh and the reception of the blood in the kiyur. So this teaches us, the Gemara in Zvachim 32, that the slaughtering of the korban may be performed by a zar. And so Shmuel Hanavi was the one who had the privilege of teaching us at that very early age this halacha. But because he pronounced the halacha in the presence of Eli, who was the Kohen Gadol and the reigning authority of Am Yisrael, he wanted to put him to death because of the punishment of Rebbe. And what it deduces from this, the psukim, that he was rendering because of the smicha of Vayishchatu. Okay. Now, there are bewildering aspects to this whole narrative. Bewildering. So the Marsha in the Chiddushei Agodos says, how could Eli have wished to punish Shmuel for rendering a halachic decision in the presence of his teacher when he's only, according to most Meforshim, he's only 2 years old? Because it says ad yigmal nanar, when the child is weaned. And according to Rashi, this means that he was 24 months old when he was weaned. That's when children typically stop weaning. So the Maharsha kvetches and says, Eli didn't intend for Shmuel to be punished by human hands, but misa bidei shamayim. As the Gemara explains in Eruvin, one who renders a halachic decision in the presence of his teacher deserves the death penalty, but it's only misa bidei shamayim. And the Chidah in the Rosh David adds that a penalty Bidei Shamayim does not depend on chronological age, but on knowledge. Das is the Chiddush. You're not chayiv misa until you're a major, until you're bar mitzvah. So what are you telling me at age 2? It doesn't make sense. Comes along the chidah and says the most amazing chiddush, ara and venora, that when it comes to misa bidei shamayim, there it's not related to how old you are, but how much knowledge you have. And apparently this kid was an Iloi, and therefore he knew, and therefore he was subject to that. If indeed, in Eli's opinion, Shmuel qualified to be punished with death by the hands of heaven for his actions, so then why did he agree to annul the punishment? Obviously, he agreed because after she pleaded with him, he rescinded. How did Chana's plea, El Hanar Hazeh Hitpalalti? This is the child that I prayed for, indicating that she had prayed specifically for this child and not another, influence Eli's decree. Clearly, if the punishment was deserved, it shouldn't have been swayed by the mother's decree. And this is not answered anywhere. So I want to share, and we have to come back full circle to understand, if we can, the fact that there was some mitigation to Korach's claim that his progeny would end up with Shmuel. And we have to come back to the claim by the authors of Tanakh that Shmuel was on the level of Moshe and Aaron. And so I want to bring to you a Zohar Chodosh. A Zohar Chodosh is considered very late by the scholars. Zohar itself is considered 12th, 13th century by most scholars, although it purports to be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai from the 2nd century. Don't want to get down into that rabbit hole. But everyone agrees that Zohar Chodosh is a kind of medrash, a medieval medrash. And Rabbi Akiva is walking along the path, Holchim Baderech, with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar is the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, so they're walking. This idea of the Tanoim walking and discussing whilst walking has a lot of significance, according to Kabbalah. They're walking. In the Gemara, it never says they're walking. They're in the base medrash and they're learning. But Oisashah, suddenly, Bocha Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva bursts out crying. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer, amai bechata? Excuse me, why are you crying, Rabbi Akiva? Lama ata bocha? Amalei, so he says, Oy ledor sheyu yisomim micho. Woe is to the generation from who will come Yisomim, meaning there will be a generation in the future full of orphans. Amalo Rabbi Eliezer al tomakach. Don't say that, because there's a pasuk, Ki lo alman Yisrael. The Am Yisrael never becomes orphaned. Elo vaylador shiyu yisomim beli av beli chacham moira velo talmin hoga v'yom yovo bikfus mashiach. Okay, so he amended his statement to saying, okay, woe is to the generation. He's trying to explain his grief, his anticipatory grief. Woe is to the generation that will have orphans without fathers, without Talmidei Chachamim, without teachers, without Talmidim Hugan. Hugan means people who are Talmidei Chachamim, but Hagun, appropriate, they're proper.
Yeah.
And the Yomim Yavo, and these days will come as the time of Mashiach will come. Today is the Yotzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose whole she'ifa was that we have to bring Mashiach by doing good works, so dedicating this in the memory of the Yesod Tzadik Olam, the Tzadik Hador, who understood the importance of rebuilding Klal Yisrael after the Holocaust like no one else. And in to the Mashiach, woe is to that generation. Everyone in that generation before the onset of the Mashiach will be chatzufim. They'll be azes ponim. They'll be brazen. Batishkach Torah, and Torah will be forgotten. Ve'ein doresh, ve'ein mevakesh. Oh my gosh, when I read that, I choked up. You could be learning all the Torah you want, and you can spit it out, and you can be, a walking encyclopedia. But ein doresh, ve'ein mevakesh. What does that mean? No one is being aroused by the excitement and by the beauty through doresh, through digging deeper with your critical faculties, your knife, your critical tools, because you realize that the Torah is a treasure, and the deeper you dig with the sharper the knife, the deeper it reveals its treasures. Ein dorish, ein mevakesh. No one is asking the right questions anymore. Yichye nivaze v'chadlishiv. Vay ledor hahu, oy to that generation. Oy ledor hu kishayavu oisador. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer, and this is the Rabbi Akiva who was smiling on the temple after the destruction, because he not only saw that the foxes were walking over the temple, but he also then said, if the foxes are walking, right, the last three psukim in Eicha, al zeh hayad ove libenu, al ele chashchu einenu, al shualim, right? Even the foxes are walking over the sacred ground. Shualim hilchuvo. But then he said, but if that's the case, therefore, if that prophecy is fulfilled, then the prophecy of the return to Zion will be fulfilled. So he had a shmeichel on his face. But here he says, I'm crying because before that Ikvus de Mashiach comes, there will be a door that is so bereft of spirituality. So Rabbi Eliezer wants to comfort him and says, you're right. Ein ador hahu yuchol liskayem. If that's the case, then that generation cannot sustain itself spiritually. Elo behevel pm shel tinoko shel ben rabam. You have to go to a cheder and listen to the kinderlach, just screaming the Tanakh and the Mishnah, the hevel pm, the vapor that emerges from these kinderlach, that can give you some kind of comfort. Kat inun rakichem bavad kshehem na'arim v'ktanim bilvad. And now he says something very profound that I want to bring to your attention. That only happens as long as they are na'arim, nar. When they are a nar, they don't fear authority. They don't fear the Kohen Gadol. When they are nar, there is a freshkeit to their looking at Torah, which somehow had inu kashishin, when they become crustaceous and old, then the Torah is forgotten from them, not just in terms of memory loss, that they lose the memory, but they lose the freshkeit. Hama'atik is Divrei Rabbi Eliezer may be right, and I'm going to bring you a proof to Rabbi Eliezer's comment about the freshness of Torah and the need for Torah to be completely fresh like a nar. Why? What does it say? When Chana, the mother of Shmuel, goes back to Eli HaKohen and begs for the life of Shmuel, he says, El Hanar Hazeh Palalti. Miloshon ze eino mashma sheitpalel yelo ben. It should have said et haben hazeh hitpalalti. This is the punchline, Raboisai. Why does she say es hanar hazeh hitpalalti?
What?
I am praying for my son. So the answer here in the Zohar is Omro Chano LaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yehi Rotzoin Shebesha'ah Sheyagada. She wasn't just praying for a son. That wasn't enough for her when she went there to Shiloh. She had grand designs for this child. So she's asking, and we need to ask. We must not settle just for progeny. Yehi Rotzon Shebesha'ah Sheyagadel. When he grows, Yishtadel ba'avodas hamokum, he will toil and horror and study and work hard in the divine worship, not in the cultic worship, but in the inner spiritual worship, Kamo Akshav Shehu Nar, like now when he is a Nar. It could be that she had a boy already. And when she's davening for the boy, it wasn't that she was barren. She had had a son. And now she's taking that son to him, according to the Zohar, and says, listen, I'm not satisfied with this. I don't want him just to be in the Cheder with the Hevel PM. And then when he grows old, he becomes crustaceous and he loses that power and that fight and that spiritual energy to work and mevakesh and doiresh Torah. Why? Shenolad li kvar. He was already born to me. I already had a physical son. That's not what I'm davening for. Hitpalalti alov sheyishaer betzidkato. That he will remain in his freshkeit, in his narus, the way that he challenged the kahunim. And what do you need a kohen for? Why didn't you learn it this way? He was doiresh u'mevakesh. I think it was a dazzling Zohar that brings to bear onto this pasuk el anar hazeh hispalalti, that we too have to daven, not only for our children, but for the inner child within each of us. The inner child in each of us gets old and crustaceous and becomes used to the daily Sedra, the weekly Sedra, and the weekly Parshanut, and we just go through this without questioning, with that doiresh v'mevakesh, seeking answers, digging deeper, cutting deeper, critically thinking. I think that that's what we're doing. And so to end up and to give Korach his rightful place, because in the future, Labanatseach livnei Korach, Korach was a gehoibene Yid, according to the Hasidic tradition. We may say in his honor and in his memory that when he looked down the generations to Shmuel Hanavi and saw that Shmuel was placed on equal level with Moshe and Aaron in Psalm 99, as we sing, Moshe v'Aaron b'koi, u'Shmuel b'koi. Why on the same madrega? Korach saw something that the others didn't see. He saw that Shmuel's ethos, and God says to Jeremiah, just one man, if you bring me just Shmuel, it won't be enough. Kick him out of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because God is telling to Jeremiah, they've lost that frischkeit. They've lost that doireshim of vakesh. That may be to mitigate the pshat against Korach, to realize that on the deepest level, as the Arizal says, this whole thing between Korach and Shmuel and Chana is all a recycling of Adam and Chava. And we don't have to go into that, but the Arizal sees beyond Korach as Korach. Korach isn't Korach. He's a recycled soul who will then come back later on, both in Shmuel and in the future. We may all be zoicher to learn from the lessons that the Zohar is telling us, that we should all keep digging to prevent not just the senility of memory itself, which is grabbing me, but also to keep our freshkeit in Torah.